Hello, everyone. Well, we've wrapped up the age of imperialism and we move in directly to America and its role during World War I, or as it was known at the time, the war to end all wars, which was certainly the expectation once everything had been settled. But before we look at any kind of settlement or even the action of World War I, we want to examine the causes. And to do so, we typically rely on a framework referred to as MAIN. And we use the MAIN to symbolize militarism, alliances that are entangling. I is for the imperialism that we have been studying, and N is nationalism. Now, when we look at militarism, the advancements in militarism are generated by industrialization. And the industrialization had created weapons that, well, we use the term quite often, but these are the original weapons of mass destruction. Huge artillery shells, fully automated machine guns. And the pacing of equipment had far outpaced the strategies for military leaders. And it's going to lead to a stalemate, trench warfare, and a quagmire that's going to last about 4 years. The militarism was driven by the broken and shattered paradigm. There had been a harmony in Europe for many centuries, but it was thoroughly shattered with the 30 Years' War during the 17th century. And throughout the devastation and desolation that took place across Western Europe in the 30 Years' War, no one suffered more than the Germanic kingdoms. And fresh off of the heels of that, we have Frederick the Great. And what Frederick was doing was, as the King of Prussia, he was expanding the power base of that particular German kingdom in the north of Europe. Once we finish with Frederick the Great, we move fairly quickly into the power of Napoleon and the Napoleonic Wars, which is going to leave a further desolate and a further divided Europe. Now, even though after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and Europe did experience a protracted period of peace, there was the alliances that we call entangling. Now, those alliances are going to work like something along the lines of a powder keg. And in particular, this area of Europe, known as the Balkans, would be the place that had the most turmoil and was the most likely location for us to have the outbreak of what would become World War I. One man who foresaw the issues and the problems and the turmoil latent in the Balkans was Otto von Bismarck, who, little ironically, is one of the people who helped to create the world that would blow up in World War I. What Bismarck had done was to work Europe into a roughly controlled frenzy. And he sought to maintain a balance of power in his nation's favor. Now, his original nation was Prussia. Remember how we've talked about Frederick the Great before. Well, now, Otto von Bismarck is going to work relentlessly, forming alliances and agitating his great enemy, France. And through a concatenation of all of these factors, he will ultimately be able, after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, in 1871, the work of Bismarck was culminated with the creation of the new and the first German Republic. And when that took place, it was solemnized and made official to add as much insult to injury at the Palace of Versailles in the Hall of Mirrors. In France, Germany is declared the new kid on the block. That is incredibly powerful. So if we look at 1871, we see Europe very divided. We see Europe aligned in different regions of loyalty, and there's an arms race, the militarism driven by the divisiveness and the entangling alliances. So what will happen is Germany will form an alliance with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. And this is going to push and press France to look for help. So France is going to form the Holy Alliance with the Russian Empire. And then they're going to bring Great Britain into it in the Entente. Italy would be a part of it before Italy broke faith. And Italy essentially stayed on the sidelines during most of World War I. The next issue that we examine is imperialism. And imperialism was, in the words of Kaiser Wilhelm, who is in fact going to be the leader in Germany at the outbreak of World War I. He's going to make an infamous quote when he says, "Germany needs its place in the sun." And what he was referencing was the fact that the German Republic was lagging behind France, Great Britain, and even the United States in imperialist expansion and power. Recall that we talked about in the Spanish-American War, America took ultimately Guam and the Philippines. We got Puerto Rico, liberated Cuba from the Spanish Empire. But the end game was to have naval bases where we could refuel and we could take on coal to continue powering those ships. Well, Germany felt like they were being squeezed out on the world stage. And so there was an intense competition amongst the developed powers for imperialist colonial locations. Then, concurrent with all of that, was an undertow of nationalism. And what that means is, we look at my globe here, Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore. And it neither existed before World War I. It was a short-lived conglomeration of a variety of Slavic peoples, all of whom wanted to be able to be autonomous and decide their own destiny. Well, there was an undercurrent of that throughout the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And on June 28th, 1914, when the Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie, when they were touring Sarajevo in this part of the world, the Balkans, that had so much rebellious undercurrents and was seething to be free, he was assassinated. And when that happened, we were only 1 month away from World War I beginning, which is going to take place on July 31st, 1914. So we have those underlying causes: militarism, those entangling alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. And the way that that looked on June 28th, 1914 was Austria, which at that point from Vienna was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Well, it demanded that little Serbia essentially become a protectorate of the empire. Well, Serbia was very concerned and did not want to go to war with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but then also wanted to be able to maintain their autonomy and their independence. So Serbia has dialogue with their big friend in Russia, and they ask Russia for their help and support in case the Austro-Hungarians become a little too heavy-handed. Suspicious of that, the Austro-Hungarians go to the relatively new Germany, and they ask for help from Germany in case Serbia is able to pull in the big, powerful Russia and the Tsarist Empire to support them. Well, the quick upshot is that Germany responded with the blank check response, where Germany promised everything militarily that Hungary could hope for. This emboldened the Austro-Hungarians. They made their demands. While all of this was taking place, this book, The Great War, also chronicles the original German plan and its culmination. So while all of these powers are forming up in their alliances, Germany gets ready and gears everything up for the Schlieffen Plan. And that was that what they intended to do was to race through Belgium to circumvent the Ardennes forest and come and knock France out of the war quickly. That would allow them to turn around and then face the Russian Empire, which was going to be slower to field an army. The Germans were getting everything ready. They're preparing to launch the lightning Schlieffen Plan. While that was happening, ambassadors from Germany were talking to the UK and saying, listen, if we are to violate the neutrality of Belgium, that's not going to be a problem, right? And in fact, the German ambassador's infamous quote is, surely you would not go to war over a piece of paper? Well, Great Britain would, in fact, honor their commitment. They would, in fact, go to war over their pledge on that piece of paper. However, they didn't make that clear enough, really, to the Germans. And then ultimately, what is the final efficient cause for World War I blowing up is when the Russians began to mobilize. And as soon as the Germans were aware that Russia was preparing for war, they launched the Schlieffen Plan. They raced through neutral Belgium. King Leopold ordered the dikes be blown up and slowed the advance of the Germans. And ultimately, Germany was not able to knock France out, ever. And soon the British Expeditionary Force would arrive and would buttress the French resistance. Russia would eventually field their army and they would put pressure on Germany from the east until we have the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917. We will pick our story up next time. Thank you very much for your time and hanging out.